Welcome to this week's episode of the And Both podcast. Valerie Polunas joins me to talk about conflict. She is the founder and operator of Flowing River Conflict Solutions, and they are a training, design, workshop, coaching, relationships coaching business that helps all different ages and stages and types of relationships through conflict with confidence. And so she and I talk about a lot of different things this week, some of which is navigating entrepreneurship and motherhood, and some of which is navigating conflict in those relationships, but also what it means to see a different way forward, either in our own personal life or broader political strokes, things like that. So we kind of run the gamut. But the thing that I really love about having her here is that the focus is not necessarily on how can I do more, how can I be right, how can I win whatever battle I'm in right now, but it's how can I take a look at this outside of my involvement in it and really take the personal piece out of it. And so there's a couple of different examples throughout the episode of how that happens. So I hope that you enjoy the show this week. If you do, please consider supporting us by liking our posts on social media, by leaving a rating for us, by reviewing the show, because that does help spread the word so that people that may be interested in hearing these conversations or need to hear these conversations are able to find it. So enjoy, and here's Valerie. Hello and welcome to the And Both podcast. Here we are going to hear from moms and those in motherhood that are doing the thing that works for them. They are honoring themselves alongside the all-encompassing role and level of expectation that is modern motherhood. And we are going to hear from as many different people as possible in their own experience. So you can find people to relate to. You can hear stories that will make you laugh, make you cry, all of the above, and that we will come together as a community to support one another in a way that is holistic and honoring of the woman and the mother as a whole. Hello and welcome to another episode, or welcome back to another episode of the And Both podcast. I am here today with Valerie Polunas. Hello, Valerie.
Hi.
I'm a little sparkly this morning. I'm not sure why. I think I drank my coffee too fast, but welcome. And I am excited for you to be here. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. Well, I am the founder and operator of Flowing River Conflict Solutions, LLC, which is an organization dedicated to helping folks navigate a conflict with confidence. And I do that through training design, through workshop and meeting facilitation, and through organization and relationship systems coaching, which means I can coach individuals, but my forte is really in coaching two or more people at the same time. And that can be couples, it can be mother, daughter, or siblings, or founders of a startup, or any kind of business unit or nonprofit board. Any system really is what I work with.
That's cool. So how did you get into that?
How did I get into that? I studied conflict management in both undergrad and graduate study, and wound up applying it in the field of education. Most predominantly, I felt like it was really important for folks to build skill sets in communicating and working through conflict together in a constructive way. And I started working with young kids, actually. My first job using it was working with 4th through 6th graders, helping them set up peer mediation programs and teaching them these communication skills to work through conflict with each other, and kind of worked my way up through different age groups over time. And so I've had an opportunity to apply it in a lot of spaces, but not always as directly as I'd like. And that was a huge part of what made me decide to start my own business now.
I love that. You had said I had read something that you had written about this idea of like just that, like being able to having this skill set and then not really having as much control or say about where it gets applied. And so is that And that's what led you to going out on your own.
That's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
One of the reasons, yeah, because I'd always found a way to work it into what I was doing, but I wanted to be doing it directly. And I really felt like I think the world's always needed it. But I think especially over the past few years, we've seen things just get incredibly disruptive and polarized, and people are very isolated from one another. And I've seen a lot of people really struggle to talk to someone else about anything difficult. Anything difficult. And I just felt like I had these skill sets. I had these talents. I had the experience. Why am I not spending more of my energy just directly applying this and helping people in that way?
Yeah. One thing I always wonder about things like this, like where you're sort of navigating interpersonal relationships and helping people navigate interpersonal relationships, when you've done it across the lifespan, do you notice, like when you've worked with kids in the 4th grade kind of range and then you work with adults, is there a time when you see the adults where you're like, oh yeah, no, somebody did not address this in 4th grade and this is how it happens to roll out?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's the thing about conflict. Any friction that we have with anybody else, even if it's not incredibly destructive or heated, right? We're coming from different experiences and different value sets. And a lot of what triggers us in a conversation or really puts us in a place where we're being incredibly unskilled are experiences we had when we were younger. And if we don't have the experience, if we don't have someone who's teaching us those skills and giving us the opportunity to adjust our mindset when we approach conflict at a young age, we don't have that to lean on when we get in those situations, the same as someone who does. So yeah, I definitely see adults struggling with things that probably they don't have to struggle with if they've had that background prior. But nobody is too old to learn these skills and to work on these skills. And they are perishable. They're something that people have to put energy into on a regular basis. So it's not something where if you learned it as a child, you're going to just be good forever, right? You have to work on it.
Yeah, that's the idea, right? It's like you don't have to learn how to share once in like, preschool. It's like you have to navigate how to share or how to like disagree as the stakes kind of rise throughout life and experiences and things like that. So what does a day look like for that? Like, do you bounce back and forth between age groups, or are you primarily in one now? Like, how does that, I feel like that's a lot of different languages if you're going back and forth between groups now.
Yeah, I'm primarily working with adults now. I think there's going to be a point where I do want to get back to working with teens at the very least. And my day is really, it's not bouncing necessarily through age groups. It's bouncing between the design piece, right? There's a lot of workshops I try to design to teach these skills. And then it's bouncing to the coaching piece, right? And there's prep work that's to be done there. I'm, trying to get to know my clients before I work with them. And when I'm in the midst of working with them, it's reflecting back on what happened at the last session and what do I want to shift or adjust for them now. And even with all that prep, sometimes when I'm meeting with them in the moment, they've had something happen since the last time we talked where I need to pivot to that conversation with them. So I'm really shifting between the different jobs I've put or the services I've put into my business more so than age groups. But I am bouncing between, say, business unit and couples, which the tools are the same and the competencies that I use when I'm coaching those groups or training those groups are the same, but they have different needs and they speak different languages in a way when we're talking about conflict. So there is a bit of a bouncing around when it comes to that.
And how do you navigate startup life? We'll call it just a big broad bracket, and motherhood, because this is what we talk about here, right? Like, how do you like starting a business, having all the prep of just going into these meetings, having the prep of being a business owner and the ongoing development and the sort of the mapping of where you want the business to go and what you want things to do is all a whole thing. And then you also are a mom. How does that all work together?
Does all work? Some days it doesn't. And I have to just be okay with that, right?
We need more people to say that.
It's not perfect. There is no perfect formula. I do very deliberately try to plan any kind of meetings or interactions with folks between about 9 a.m. and 4 p.m., which is, the school day. Sometimes I can't, and I have to do something in the evening, or I have to do something on the weekend. And that's where I work with family or my spouse to have him occupied and, to be able to do this work. Like he just went out today to go help a family member for a couple hours. So I'd have time and space to do this with you, right? That's a huge part of it. And I think it requires a lot of strategic planning and decision making. I have to be really thoughtful about what I can do. I have to be thoughtful about what resources I can leverage. I really have to think ahead a lot and be willing, though, to take a different path than I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. I think there's a lot of message out there of being all in, right? And, make your $1 million in 6 months. If the reality is that's not going to be the case for me. So it's a different set of expectation that I've given myself. And I just find a way to make it work within the timing I have. I work with people that understand that. I think that's the biggest thing. I try to build relationships with people first. I think that's the best way for a mom-based business to work, right? Because when I'm building relationships, I'm meeting people as people, and they're meeting me in that way too. And they have an understanding of who I am as a full person. So they're more likely to get that I need to schedule things at a certain time than doing those cold sales calls and things like that with people who don't know me.
Yeah. I think the thing that I on my own end underestimated, and I wonder if you feel the same, because there is elements of like when you are an entrepreneur and you are a business owner and you are a mom, on paper you can make it look very cut and dry, right? Like you can schedule a box here and you could schedule a box here, and you get all these pieces together and you're like, all right, I am going to go out there and I'm going to just win the day. The thing that I underestimated as a business owner and continue to underestimate is the on-ramp and off-ramp between each of those boxes. It's that idea of like when you are going to prep to go meet with people and you're reviewing your notes and you're getting into the headspace of like, okay, now I am doing this and I'm working with these people and I am like on this kind of like landing pad, and then I go do the thing. And then it's not like a black and white transition, right? Like you can't just like close the door and they're like, okay, and now here we go. Like there's a merge onto the highway of business and a exit ramp off of the highway of business. And I think that the highway goes to the motherhood highway. Like it's not like we slow down. We just keep changing onto different highways. So I wonder if you've experienced anything similar to that.
I guess what I'm hearing is that there isn't really a point where you stop.
Yeah, no.
Maybe other people can get that break, right? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's going from job A to job B, essentially.
Yeah.
And, and I, in some ways, being the entrepreneur, I have a lot more control over what I do or don't do. Whereas as a mom, as you know, I mean, there's very little control. If anything, it teaches us that about life. And so I don't know that there's a clear on or off ramp. And I struggle with it because there are days where I have an idea that I'm working on and it doesn't come until 10 minutes before he gets home. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to put it down. And that's really hard to tell a 10-year-old, I need a few more minutes because I just need to get this out. I just need to send this last email out to this client so they're good for another week or two. And that can be difficult, but it comes down to communicating with my child and with everybody else, right? I'm just saying what I need is just 5 more minutes because I'm feeling really good about this and I need to be able to wrap it up so I can be here 100% for you. They don't always hear that. But a huge part of it is being able to share, what it is I'm doing, why it's important to me and what I need from them in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You remember that movie Speed where the bus couldn't go below 50 or it would blow up? Like I have never identified with a movie more than motherhood and starting a business. It's like, I know we're going to run out of gas, but we just have to like get to the next thing before we hope it all works out, right? But yeah, like I think that the part too that we don't always talk about so much is like is saying that stuff out loud to our kids, like saying like I just need 5 more minutes, because I think that a lot of times what happens is you're head down and you're into, whatever it is you're doing, and somebody comes in and it's like, how do you shift and say, oh, okay, I need 5 more minutes, or like how many 5 more minutes can you get before your kid's like, it's always 5 more minutes, and you're like, right, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it is, but how do you navigate that?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there will be a lot of, how long has it been? Right? If I say I need 5 more minutes, 2 minutes in, how long has it been? Like, it hasn't been more than 2 minutes. You need to go. I can't say I always handle that expertly, even with my background. But yeah, if it keeps happening where that disruption keeps coming in and I lose the focus anyway. So at that point, I say, all right, enough's enough, and I'll come back to it, because if the inspiration was there, it'll be there again. I found that even before having my child, that when it comes to creating stuff like this, sometimes it's there and sometimes it isn't. So I'm more okay than I used to be with just letting it go and trusting that it'll come back. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to make that clear, but I think it comes with time. I think this is a transition that we're going through as a family, and in any transition, there's in a relationship of any kind, there's at least one person who is all in, right, moving forward and making that change happen. And the other people in that relationship are somewhere between like digging their heels and not wanting to move and maybe getting dragged along a bit. So I recognize the fact that when it comes to this transition, when it comes to this change, I'm the one jumping off the cliff, right? And they're somewhere behind. And so I've had to just figure out what are those ways to help them get over that edge with me, and talk about what their expectations are and mine, and what we all need from each other, because I can't make that transition without them. We are a system together. We will be always, and I have to work with it, or I could take the option of just cutting all that off, right? But what does that do? What's the impact there? And the impact there is huge. That's what I love about the concept of this, right? Both and. It means that it is possible to have both. You just have to be able to talk through that with other people and see where they're at, and come up with a set of expectations together on how to move forward. Because if I just say I need 5 more minutes, he may not understand why I need 5 more minutes. He may not really, he may not get it. But if I can put it in the context of, hey, when you're in the middle of playing Minecraft with your friends, right? And I say it's 5 minutes to dinner, it's hard for you to put it down, right? You want to build that last thing. You want to have 5 more minutes with those friends of yours. So what do you need from me in that moment? If I can put it in a context that he can relate to, it's probably a little easier for him to then go, okay, when she needs 5 minutes, it's the equivalent of me needing that time with my friends, doing something that I enjoy doing too. So I can't say that I have any perfect way of doing this, of making that happen. But I think relating it to the other person in a way that's going to make sense for them and resonate for them can help.
Yeah. And I think too, I mean, given your background, like you're showing him like this is, the relating, like you're saying, relating the context, but also showing him like this is something that you're going to navigate. Like you're not 9 or 10, you're his mom, and you've been navigating this through all the different seasons of your life. So like, how do you navigate this 5 more minutes concept as a kid, and how do you navigate it as an adult, and how that changes over time?
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. And the other, I had a question in there and I think it fell out of my head because, there we are. The piece that I am always fascinated to see is that when moms start businesses and we want control over that piece, and like, I don't, the veil is off, right? Like, nobody thinks that you're going to start a business and all of a sudden there's like 50,000 people walking through the door. If you go on LinkedIn or you go on Instagram, someone will sell you a course telling you that that's what's going to happen for the low price of, like, part of an internal organ. However, like, we know, right? We know that, like, no one's fridge looks like the one that's all perfectly stacked. We get it. It's all like, there's that and then there's life. But when you are, I think the thing that is really refreshing, and I think the thing that moms are talking about more now, is this concept of, like, I want to do this thing, which is I want control over my schedule. I want control over my career. I want control over the choices. I understand, agree, sign off, check, whatever, that I am going to have to work twice as hard, 10 times as hard, whatever, for a period of time in order to get this plane off the ground and carry on. But that however long it takes for me to get this plane off the ground is not going to look like everybody else's. And once I have made peace with that, I am okay knowing that I am entering into this period of, like, I have got to overcome all of these things, have these conversations, have these hurdles and all of that stuff. But, like, once the pressure of I have to do this in 6 months or it's a failure, or I have to do this in a year or it's a failure, is once that's gone, there is the people that I talk to are like, I am starting a business. It is going to look like this. The timeline is different. That's okay. Then there's like a calm in the chaos, peacefulness about that for moms. And I wonder, do you feel like that's something that for you that's happened?
Yeah. Yes, because I think I felt like the second I signed the paperwork to start the business that I needed to immediately make money. I needed to immediately have a client list so long, right? And it took a few months to realize, like, this is going to be painstaking. And I think I was fortunate too. I have a lot of people in my life who said to me, "Oh, that can take 3 years for that to show any real stability. So you're on the right track." And I think that helps to have people surrounding you that normalize for you the difficulty, regardless of whether or not you're a mom. And I have had a lot of people in my corner who have different business expertise that can give me advice. So I get to avoid those courses that cost me an internal organ. That's helped a lot, take a lot of the pressure off, that I have these resources through my network who can support me through this. But yeah, it took a little while to have an ease and a comfort with the idea that this wasn't going to happen immediately, that this was going to take some time. And I think what kind of helped click that in for me was that I'd worked in and studied nonviolence, and some of these social movements, especially nonviolence movements, they take decades, and there are successes and there are setbacks. And I think entrepreneurship is very similar, right? That you're going to start out maybe doing amazingly well and then have a few months that aren't so great, right? Where the money is not coming in. And so that's already put me in a mindset that I'm in it for the long haul, that I'm not going to see a success right away. And even if I do, I have to be prepared for a step back potentially. I think that's helped. I think the background I've had too in program management, I've always been in positions in education where we've had to make our own money, where we've had to generate students, paid students. And that's helped too, because I understand that there are ups and downs in business cycles and things like that. So that's really helped. I think just having that background. But I mean, I even took on a job for a few months right after I started the business because I was honestly scared. I was scared about the idea of having no income for a while, but I wound up dropping it because the work I wanted to do for the business was requiring that priority. And I guess I just reached a mental state where I said, enough is enough. I need to just be all in with this and take the risk. It gets easier if you have planned for that risk. And it's not just I dove off the cliff without thinking about it. And I think a lot of moms are like that. So I think that's what I would encourage other moms is that you are likely a huge planner and anticipator and project manager in your own right. You already have the ability to manage risk better than most people. So that alone, I hope would give mom the incentive to dive into what's happening and really try to do this.
Yeah, I think, definitely echo that. And the idea of like, I think that oftentimes moms don't necessarily give themselves the credit in the skills that you develop through no choice experience, right? Like if your kid gets sick and they go into the hospital, you can't be like, okay, well, I just don't understand how healthcare works. Like you're like, okay, well now I learn everything there is to possibly know about healthcare. And now I understand how the system works and who I need to call and all of that stuff. And all of that translates into business. Like I don't know too many people that are saying like, oh, I'm going to start a business and then I'm going to go to business school. I'm going to go do all of this. And this is how it works. Right. It's like, I've had enough. I need more control. I played in the system for a while and the system doesn't function. But like, there is no greater stake if you do not succeed, and success is different. There is not like a regular, one goalpost that we're all striving for. But if you do not succeed in motherhood, because it's a human at the end of it, right? Like we just don't stop. And there's no, okay, well, I'll just try again tomorrow. I mean, there is the try again tomorrow, but essentially you're going to do it tomorrow. So I love the idea of like, you are more capable than you think. I love to hear people say like you have the skills that you need in order to be able to go out and do the things that you are wanting to do.
Yeah, I think we let the fear of the unknown, or we let the fear of like letting out a part of us that maybe we don't share with other people. We let that get in the way. Because I think all of us have parts to us that are actually really strong and really amazing, but we keep them to ourselves for one reason or another. And that's something with the coaching that I've really been starting to learn is those parts of us can be honest to goodness allies if we let them out into the world, and they can help us get over those fears and, take that first step. But we have to let them. Yeah. And so I think helping people understand, I mean, becoming a mom, there is no real playbook for that, right? Every book, every blog out there, they all contradict each other. So it's not like we have a specific route we have to take as mothers. And I had the same thing when I had my kid, and I continue to think this, right? Is my mother, my grandmother, every woman before me was able to do this with probably definitely less scientific knowledge, right? Of how to keep someone alive. So if we can raise kids without having that specific playbook, then who says we can't do that with business as well?
Mm-hmm. And I wonder if are there traits in when you meet people and you talk about like, these are the things that you need to share out in the world. Are there similar traits that you see across the spectrum of people that you work with?
I would say that in terms of these traits or these sort of parts of ourselves that don't always come out, there's usually a performer or some kind of warrior or protector that either doesn't come out or is acting in a very unskilled, childlike way for us, and we just need to redirect them. But those two tend to be, I think, themes that I see. And when I've seen clients bring out that performer or bring out that warrior in themselves, like there's an immediate shift. in what they're able to do. I had a client that was starting her own radio show, had never done it, and is doing it in 2 languages. And yeah, and there was some unease and some uncertainty around like, should I be doing this? And should I be doing this at my age? Should I be doing this when everyone else is doing it is, college age or whatever? And we got to talking about those internal parts of her that she doesn't always let out. And the one that she chose that she's been leveraging has really made a difference. I hear it in her show already, in the way she's presenting things and the way she's going through a show now versus before. So I think if people find whatever that is, and it doesn't have to be that warrior or that performer, there's other parts too that can be really, really useful. But if you could find that, get a coach or a therapist or someone to help you find that in you and bring that out when it's needed, it really can help, especially when it comes to things that are risky, like business. I think it is necessary. But any creative pursuit and anything where it might be something that we've always desired to do, but have never actually gone and done, it might require that side of us.
Where your interests and passions are in terms of like career and life and all of those pieces, but we get caught up in the, should I really be doing this? Is this the right time? Do I have the right qualifications? All of that. And then when you look out at things like social media or people selling courses or things like that, those people are all telling you that once you do the thing that's been told that you need to do, then you have permission to go out and do that. And you have like, that's like, you've checked the box and now you'll be ready. And it's like, how does that person know that you're ready? Like, why? First of all, like, where does that person live? Like, they don't know you. So who's to say if you just up and decide that you don't need to take this course or you don't need to go and do this thing? I mean, you can't go be a surgeon because you feel like people can't tell you what to do. Like, it's all going to be within
one thing. That's one thing.
Sort of like reasonable, legal requirements. But this idea of like, who's to say, like, why does that person get to tell you when you should or should not be doing that based on what they're trying to sell you in order for you to go do that? That I think needs to be broadcast out into the world a little bit more or a lot more.
Yeah, I think you touched on a really important part. Like they don't know you, right? And nobody's going to know us like we know ourselves. Because again, there are things about us that we keep from everybody in the world. And I think to your point, if we can know ourselves well enough to know who we are, but also who we are not, that helps set some boundaries, right? And that helps. I think that helps with that piece we talked about before, right? Where, how do you do this on your own timeline or in your own way? If I know who I'm not, I know that I'm not going to write a book, right? Or I know that I don't want to make $1 million in 6 months because that would mean I have to cut out everybody else in my life. That piece, I think a lot of people don't do. Maybe we know who we are, but we don't always think about the things that are just sort of sitting in the background that we don't think about. That's helped me tremendously to declare who I'm not, because then I get a better sense of what do I actually need and what do I actually want to do. And that makes it easier to say no to the quick fix courses and to the people who are trying to suggest I need these things to be able to do what I want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's that like trusting that what is right for you and more importantly, what is not right for you. But do you have, I feel like a lot of times when there's sort of like studying what you studied and working with people in sort of these close interpersonal relationships and seeing how this all moves through the lifespan, like it all makes sense. I wonder, like, how did you get into conflict management? Like, what about that were you like, ooh, ding, ding on the college course thing where you're like, I want to learn about that? Like, where did that start?
That was interesting. It was a course I was taking, I think, it was in my junior year, I think, undergrad. And I took a course on political conflicts just because I was like, I need to satisfy a requirement, right? And that professor happened to be a professor of practice. in conflict management. He was mediating water disputes over in Tanzania, I think, at the time. And what we did in that course was very practical. He would give us scenarios. He would give us roles to play and say, all right, this is what matters to you and why you want this particular thing. And this is why the other person wants this. And he'd give us the practice of interacting with one another over whatever it might be. It might be an environmental dispute or something else, but it just made things really real for me. Unlike any other course before that. So I said, okay, I want to keep studying this because this is fascinating to me that there are all these pieces and parts to why people have conflict, right? Where that they feel like they can't resolve. And I had some psych courses along the way as well that really helped me understand. Now this is coming from mindset behaviors more than anything else. But I think what really solidified it for me, I wound up working in a classroom with first graders through a program called Literacy Corps, where they would send in college students to go in and help teachers and teachers' aides with early language development for kids. So I was in a first grade classroom helping kids learn how to spell cat, right? Kids who were a little bit behind the rest. And I happened to be in a classroom where there were a lot of children of immigrants and refugees. And there were a lot of children in that classroom from former Yugoslavia. And in first grade, they were all friends. They were all playing. They were, it was such a beautiful thing to see. And the teacher told me that by fourth grade, they find out why they came here and they are not friends anymore. And that made me say, okay, this is what I want to do. And I want to focus on kids because there's no reason why they should go from being the best of friends to that because of what happened in the past. There has to be a way to help them carry something different forward. So they were ultimately what made that shift for me. That professor was the start of things, but those kids were really the ultimate shift for me to want to do this.
I love that. And I'm also wildly curious about how many people out there, their career trajectory was one thing and they had, because you are not the first person. I mean, this happened in my own career. I took a class because same thing, right? I needed a class on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday at such and such time. And here's what it was. And then I wound up, that was my degree because I was undeclared. And it was just you sit in that class and all of a sudden there's the sparkles that kind of go about that. And you're like, oh, interesting. Let's scratch that a little bit more and see what's there. And then you start to see how that can weave into other pieces. Should run a poll.
Yeah. I can't explain it, right? But there's just something there that I can't even put into words. But those are the reasons, really. Yeah.
That's cool. So I feel if there's 6 people in the conflict class, in school, there should be 6,000 in the conflict class because there are a lot of different opportunities and options in the way the world is functioning right now, where people being able to just have a conversation about not getting along would do a world of good for a lot of things here and around the world.
Yeah, and I think it's growing. I mean, I volunteer for an organization called Braver Angels, and it's a nonprofit, mostly volunteer-led organization that's helping folks along the political spectrum get together, have conversations around politics, but get to know each other as people.
Yes.
To try to depolarize, the situation that we find ourselves in. And we were actually in a high school last week working with some high school students. And it's helpful to see that it's something that's being woven into schools already. When I was in high school, nobody would have thought about doing that, I don't think. But now it seems to be more the norm. And we're hearing a lot of college campuses as well, incorporating that into a freshman orientation program. They're trying to find ways. And I think even in elementary school, right, just be teaching growth mindset and teaching some of these social emotional pieces. I saw that starting already in daycare with my son when he was 4 months old. They started to work on the behavior side of things and be interplay with other kids, with other people very early on. So it makes me feel good about the future, because if this is being deliberately woven into things way more than it was when I was growing up, they have more of a potential to change things and to just have a different culture and a different mindset around conflict. But I think we still have a long way to go, because a lot of people still view conflict as completely bad, not as just a simple moment of change or friction where we're just not both in the same place. And so I think that's the next step, is to get people to a place where they understand that it actually can be fruitful, right? It can be there for us to learn from and to grow from, and become something newer and better together if we let it. So I think that's the next step.
Yeah, I think so I have two in elementary school, one in middle school, and one in preschool. But in the elementary school, they have like a social emotional learning program that goes all the way up through school. And so there's a lot of different components, and it gets layered as they go. And one of the things is they do like put out scenarios. So they'll say, like, they'll put like a picture up, and it's like somebody says something and someone else says something, and then they discuss it as a class. And the teacher asks them, like, what do you think is happening here, and how do you think this person feels, and all of these pieces. And I'm like, oh my God, this is so nice. Like, it's just the social emotional learning is what's going to save us all, quite honestly, because there is so much, I don't know, there's so much height, or like, there's so much heat, not height. Jeez. There's so much heat around discomfort now. It's like, well, if these things don't align and this is uncomfortable, then that must mean it's wrong. And in order to be right, I have to be right. Versus like, how do we collaborate and move together? So like, even in the elementary school, when they're talking about this, but then also like, it's still like weaved in, right? Like, my kids will come home and, they're talking about like the things that they learned in this social emotional learning class and all this stuff. And then they're like, and then my friend says, and it's like a parroting of some news outlet that will remain nameless, and all of these things that like people say are true or not true, and all of these things that aren't true, people say are true. And they're like, is that true? And I'm like, how is this still happening in the same day? Okay. But at least social emotional learning is there, right? Like, it has entered into the equation, and we can like maybe hopefully move focus from one onto the other. But that's, yeah.
It takes a lot of different pieces, right? And I think that the SEL is one of them. And to your point, we see things very win-lose, right? Mm-hmm. That if I give even a little, it means you've won. And I think that's where we need to shift and shift the mindset, in that I can disagree with you and talk about it with you and learn more about your position and what's underneath that, and why you feel the way what you do. And I don't have to lose an inch doing that. I don't have to lose anything. And we can even align on something. Doesn't mean we have to 100% agree. But it's this idea of, how important is it to me to resolve this with you? If it's important to me, I need to be willing to give a little, and I think the other person can too. And then it puts us in a place where we can actually put the problem out in front of us and look at the problem separate from the two of us and actually generate solutions. But until we have that willingness, until we have that awareness that it's truly important to resolve it and maintain that relationship, then yeah, we're going to keep feeling this way of like, I'm right and you're wrong, and I'm not going to give an inch. But it's good to hear that kids are having an opportunity to pick away, so that at least our day, it has a little balance between that and the nonsense going on in the adult world.
Well, and also, it's still like, I don't know if this happens to you, because I'm like, I went to elementary school in the 90s, right? So it's like, there is nothing that has really aged well in terms of like interpersonal relationships, like relationships politically, all of that. Like, nothing has aged well. I took my daughter to, she's in middle school now, but I took my daughter to her first softball game in the spring. Like I coached her team, and we're driving there, and I was like, we need to listen to, like, all that, like the warm up music that like I used to listen to. Cause I was like, this, like, I just have such good memories of like, oh my gosh, this is so fun. And like 3 lines into about 12 songs in a row, I was like, oh, right. Oh,
Right.
whoops. Oh, whoops. And she's like, Mom, why are we not listening to any of these songs? And I was like, I legitimately, like, I did not piece it together what was going on. Although, like, I know all the words to these songs. And it's just that, like, how much of that is that memory and that like regurgitation that happens outward, where now as a parent, I'm like, oh no, 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 we're not gonna just like keep this going. And that layers into like, we don't want kids in first grade to be best friends in fourth grade, where it's like, the reason we're here and the reason this is all happening is blah, blah, blah. Like, I am the generation of like, I want those kids to be friends in fourth grade. I want them to know about what happened, but I don't want them to feel like that's their burden to bear, like it was for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, that doesn't negate what happened, right? It doesn't take away the history of things, and it doesn't take away maybe whatever sacrifice those families had to make, but it's giving those kids the opportunity to carve out their own past and maybe change the trajectory of things for those people in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, that's the point. It's like, you don't want to lose. Like, I think sometimes people hold on to the fight because they feel like the fight is the history. And it's like, well, there was a fight and you can continue the fight, or you can talk about the history and why this happened. And like you're saying, like, look at that outside of, it being his family and her family, and these families are all against each other because of stuff that is out of their control. Like, you can't control where you're born. And if we can look at it that way and talk about it, I mean, there are a half a dozen examples of things that are going on in the world currently where it would be a whole lot different if we were able to step away from that and look at it for what it is in terms of like moving forward. Because there's a lot of not good that just kind of keeps getting refreshed, not recycled, but refreshed. It's like someone keeps putting more tokens in this ride that nobody wants to be on.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's needing to put aside the political identity or whatever that identity is that's causing that conflict, and focusing more on just human to human, who's there and what we have in common. I think if we could all take that time to set that stuff aside and just get to know each other as people, it changes things. That's asking a lot, and I recognize I'm saying this not being someone who's ever had to live through something like that, right?
Yeah.
So it's a lot easier for me to say, but folks I know who have been in conflict zones like that, when they're able to see the other person's humanity, it's a lot easier for them to forgive, and it's a lot easier for them to find a way forward, right? That is maybe not perfect, right? Maybe not the ideal, but better than it was, and to not keep the ride going, and to keep it the tokens in, as you said.
Yeah, there's a lot. If anyone wants a career where you're never going to run out of conflicts to work on, I mean, it's incredibly important work. Whether you're doing it on a macro level or a micro level. So I just think that it's fascinating to me how much of an impact it can have. Like you can change generations of how people look at things, and you can also change how companies grow, and you can change how people get involved and invested in different aspects. So what do you hope for the future based on the work that you're doing now? Like, where do you want the business to take? What path do you want that? 2 sentences went into one there. Sorry.
Right. I mean, it can go so many different ways. I think whatever it does, I want it to just continue to do exactly what the mission is, right? Is to help people navigate conflict with confidence. And to your point, whether it's with companies, whether it's with kids or families or schools, for me, anywhere where I can have that impact is going to be important. I think where I'm really trying to put my energy is in social impact spaces, because the organizations that are out there trying to do things like this, right? Trying to build these movements to bring people together. They have their own conflicts internally. And again, they're not necessarily destructive or bad, but they're things that maybe are holding them back from making the kind of progress they want to make in the culture. And so my focus is really on getting the coaching side stronger. And I'm working on some different things like a game to really introduce the concept of polarization and to give people opportunity to practice the mindsets and the skills in a fun way. So I'm just trying to find other sort of creative, unique ways to get this out in front of people, and especially the people doing social impact work, so that they can do that work to the best of their ability and not have these challenges in their way, because they have plenty of challenges trying to do that work.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you're trying to do it in different ways, because that's the point. It's like what is somebody's light bulb moment going to be, and how are they going to arrive at that moment?
Yeah, it won't always be the same, right? I can reach some people just by talking about it, right? But other people might need that game, might need something that takes something difficult and makes it fun, to really be able to digest it and see the importance of it. And so that's one way to do it. Anything that's going to get people together and talking and working on the problem together, for me, is a good solution. So whatever that turns out to be, that's what I'm going to pursue.
I love it. Well, can you tell everybody how they can find you? Because
sure,
you're not going to run out of conflict to help people with anytime soon. How can people find you, and how can they engage with you, and what does that all look like?
Sure. You can go to my website, which is Flowing River CF. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me under Valerie Polunas. I also have a YouTube channel through Flowing River Conflict Solutions, where I have a couple of videos. That has been a place where I've just dabbled, though. Don't judge me based on my video product at this point. That was a I'm going to cross a very risky edge for myself to do that. But those are generally speaking where you can get a hold of me and learn a little bit more about what I'm doing. So definitely check that out.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think this is one of those things, like, yeah, navigating entrepreneurship and navigating the dynamics of that, and also as that relates to like bigger world pieces. I think it's something we need to talk more about. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This has been awesome. Just to talk mom to mom and entrepreneur to entrepreneur. So thank you.
Yeah.